Yeah, I've got a few minutes before I have to go into work. So I figured I'd record a little video. Trying to get Joe Rogan's attention. You know, basically, I'm getting tired of Joe Rogan expressing his views on Christianity. I mean, if he had. See, he's generalizing Christianity based on his experience. You know, the definition of wisdom. And Joe's not a dumb guy, so I think Joe will believe this truth because anybody with any sense knows this is true. The definition of wisdom is one of my favorite things. It's like scripture to me. The definition of wisdom in one of these old dictionaries. I got a really old dictionary, it's this thick, and then I have another volume that's that thick also. Two big thick volumes of this older dictionary when people, I think, were just a little bit more on tune. But I like the definition in this old thick dictionary I have from my dad's dad or whatever. But it says wisdom is the power to judge and make the soundest judgment based on three things: knowledge, experience, and understanding. Now, Joe Rogan, you don't know a damn thing about real Christianity. You don't know a damn thing. I have 40 years of experience. 40 years of experience. And I wasn't even a Christian. You know, I can't say I lived the Christian life the whole time because of certain reasons, which I'm not going to get into. But I've always been a believer. You know, in the Bible, demons believe, you know. And Christians can be believers, but that doesn't mean that they walk correctly with God. Because the first step is to get a person to be a believer. So when it comes to Christianity, that's where I'm ahead of you. Now, I don't claim to be a walking Christian that walks in the light. It takes time to get it right. And it takes denying of self. You have to deny yourself if you're really going to be a real disciple. That's just like someone that wants to be, you know, martial arts master. You look in the old, you see in the old days, you know, kung fu and these people that follow these kung fu masters. Back in the day, they called them master because they mastered their technique, and then the student would give up. Like, for example, in the movie Kung Fu or the series Kung Fu, he would give up his life and follow and learn everything from the master, right? So I haven't given up my life for Christianity. Gave up little bits here and there, and then back in 1994, went back into sin. But what I am is a believer. Now, a real Christian becomes. The disciples would call Jesus, they'd call him master. Just like a kung fu master, they would call Jesus master. Now, I've never denied myself and followed Jesus. And I think that's what your problem is too, Joe, the fact that you haven't investigated Christianity at all. Because you don't want to give up certain things that you think you might have to give up. I think that's what your problem is, why you've never investigated it. But wisdom is the power to judge and make the soundest judgment based on knowledge, experience, and understanding. And you ain't got none, Joe. If you had some, you would at least know God is real, without a doubt. So I at least got that. And I had supernatural experiences when I first, about 40 years ago, I had quite a few supernatural experiences. And I'm going to mention my first supernatural experience as far as healing, you know. I was a young Christian, used to read the Bible a lot, had a lot of faith, had some experiences with God, you know. And you get, first of all, let me clarify this. Faith, first of all, when you get saved, and I've said this before, when you get saved, you get the only thing you get is a censer. Jesus said, let the dead bury the dead. Now, you don't believe Joe Rogan because you're spiritually dead. The dead don't have eyes. The dead don't have ears. The dead can't smell. The dead can't feel. You don't know that God's real because you're dead, Joe. You're dead spiritually. Now, when you get born again, you get a sensor. Now, a sensor, and I've explained this in other videos, a sensor is the ability to sense something. Everything about science is about building a sensor. Whether it be, oh, I got a pair of glasses, I can see. Microscope, I can see smaller things I couldn't see before. Telescope, oh, I can see galaxies that we thought were stars. Oh, the Hubble's telescope, I can see more. A telescope that can see light variations in infrared. I know more information. Build a Hadron Collider so I can sense the small world. All of these things are sensors, and you ain't got one, Joe. So if you ain't got one, you ain't got one. So first of all, I want to say that the reason you're not a believer is because you ain't got a sensor, and that's how I got ahead of you, Joe. That's why I know God is real. No, I'm acting a little stupid. I just had a couple of cups of coffee. But I guess I'm a little wired. But I mean, just that's why you don't know. And faith is based on a real experience, and you ain't got none, Joe. So when you get born again, then you have the ability to sense, just like when you take drugs, Joe. Just like when you take your drugs, you can sense another realm. Now maybe that's just a realm of consciousness. I've never explored that realm, so I don't know what it is. I'm thinking that it's just a different realm of consciousness. I mean, by everything you said, it sounds like it separates person from their ego, which basically when you're a child, you don't learn information from your intellect. You don't learn how to speak by the time you're 3 or 4 years old by anything you tried to do, right? You absorb that information. So somehow and even Jesus says that unless you become like a little child, you can't enter into the kingdom of God. And he's not just talking about entering into the kingdom, he's talking about here on earth. Because when Jesus came, he said, the kingdom of God has come unto you. So here on this earth, when you get that sensor, you can start entering into the kingdom. And one of the things that happens when you start being able to enter into the kingdom, when you have those keys that he gave to Peter, when you get the ability to enter into Jesus, who's the door, and he said the kingdom of God has come unto you, you start breaching the veil. Like when Jesus died, the veil of the temple was ripped in half. That means they started getting access to God that they didn't have before. When we sinned, what happened to us in Genesis, and I know this was over even most Christians' heads, is that Satan changed our spirit so he could have access. Like in the Bible, you won't see Satan speaking into Jesus' spirit. He had perfect contact with the Father. You see that in Genesis. As soon as they sinned, you don't see God talking to man, just casually, not casually, but talking to man. It was just a normal thing. He just talked to man. That was normal. And then when you see sin come, you see a separation. You don't see him speaking. Then, of course, on the day of Pentecost, you see these fiery tongues, and they're fire because they have to burn out the garbage, the sin, the things that block us, that keep us from hearing God. So like I said, when you get born again, you get a sensor. So I got born again and started learning about God, saw Jesus in a vision, heard God's audible voice. It took me 40 years after I heard that voice to realize how intelligent he was, how depth of his understanding was. It took me 40 years to realize this guy that speaks, not a guy, but he knows everything about me because he spoke some stuff, 2 things to me when I was younger, and I thought, he had to know me on a total psychological level to speak those 2 things he spoke to me so that it took me 40 years for me to catch up mentally before I knew that, hey, he had to know everything about me to speak those things. He had to know me, he had to have had a profound psychological understanding of me to speak the things that he spoke to me. It took me 40 years to realize how smart he was. So anyway, he knows everything about you, Joe. And the reason I made this video is, first of all, to say you don't know a damn thing about Christianity, so you should stop talking about it. Because number one, you're going to bring a curse on yourself. You keep trashing God and trashing some of his people, you're going to bring a curse on yourself. And your life's very blessed because you do keep the commandments. You do, as far as treating your fellow man. You sow good things. But if you keep sowing these bad things, Satan is going to get you, because Satan, and I know you know nothing about this kind of stuff. I mean, zero. You don't know that there's an entity that kills, steals, and destroys called Satan. Everything that happens in the world and to Christians comes from an entity who's 24 hours a day in a court in heaven speaking against anyone to kill, steal, and destroy in their life. Everything about Jesus is to restore. That's why the prosperity gospel, Christians kind of twisted it, but there's nothing wrong with prosperity because there's no lack in heaven. So Jesus trying to bring the kingdom. There's nothing. A Christian should be rich one way or another. I mean, they literally should be. They should be blessed. That's part of the Bible. That's what it is. I don't want to get into all that. But what I do want to talk about is healing. When I was a young Christian, got the sensor, started sensing God, started having those experiences, read the Bible, had faith, laying in bed one night. I had this horrible day where I had this horrible headache, just blown out. This headache was very bad, and I had fatigue. And it was just from a day of stress. You ever had a day where you just get run ragged, and then you just collapse in bed, and you're like, and you just got stressed to the point where you just had a massive headache, and you're just like wiped. So I lay down in bed with this massive headache, just wiped, no energy at all. And as I'm about ready to fall asleep, I just, childlike faith, just said, God, I know you could heal this. And I don't even know why I even said that. All I needed was a good night's sleep and wake up and you're fine, So I said that, and in a microsecond after saying that little prayer, the headache was gone, and what was really even more surprising than the headache gone was all the exhaustion was gone. Like I had a full night's sleep, and just was totally refreshed, no exhaustion at all. So I rose up out of bed, and immediately I felt guilty. I'm like, I'm like 20 years old or something or other. I felt guilty because I knew there was people in church that had cancer and that really needed a real miracle. So my thought was you didn't have to do this. All I needed was a good night's sleep. So I kept saying over and over again, you didn't have to do this. You didn't have to do this. After saying that probably 3, 4, 5, 6 times, all of a sudden it felt like something fell on me. It felt like it just fell on me from above, and whatever had left me fell back on me, and I could feel it. And when it fell back on me, I felt my headache totally came back, and the fatigue totally came back. So that was the first miracle I ever had. So the reason I wanted to record this because it's when I watch It's Supernatural, I've had my own experiences. That's why this stuff is true, because you have your own experiences. I even had well, I don't want to get in this, stretching you too much. I'm going to show some miracles here, and it's not hard for me to believe that God can do these things, because if you really think about it, every cell in my body, that's 40 trillion cells, for me to be exhausted, God had to do something to the mitochondria, everything in your cells. He had to change for me to actually not feel tired. So if he can do that, it wouldn't be too much stretching for him to raise someone from the dead because their cells are just died. So all he did was alter my cells and what took the fatigue out of them. Because when you're tired, you're probably tired on a 40 trillion cell type level. That means everything's out of balance. I mean, who knows the exact things that happen when you're tired? All I know is you go to bed in equilibrium of some kind. Must go back. Your body equalizes itself somehow. I mean, I don't know. Why do we need to sleep? All I know is it has to be something that's going on where either in the cell or someplace where it's had a chance to get rid of the bad that's in the cell or whatever and absorb more of the good, and then when you wake up you have this thing called energy, right? You recharge, which is a crazy thing. I would like to know more about that kind of stuff, but I don't, but it sounds very interesting. So if he can do that, obviously he can regenerate a cell or even make a cell. So anyway, here's a couple supernatural miracles I just want to show real quick. I'm only going to take about 7 or 8 more minutes to do this, but I'm going to play a couple miracles, which it's going to stretch you, but it doesn't not really stretching me, not after I had that experience. So let's move forward and listen to these. Now, this is a really interesting one here. Let's listen to this.
I was doing a minister's meeting. A woman comes up. She has a glass eye that's gray. Her real eye is blue.
What are we praying
And when she comes up to me for prayer, I say to her, said, "Oh, you're blind." And she rebukes me. She says, "No, I'm not blind. I just can't see." And when she says that to me, said, I knew then that she believed something was going to happen. When we prayed with her, said, her glass eye becomes a real eye in her socket. It turns blue like the other eye, and she sees out of it perfectly.
Okay, just to recap this, and Joe, you can prove this stuff whether it's true or not. This guy's named Tony Kemp. He was in Missouri, the show me state. And that's kind of what we're doing here. We're showing you, Joe. This guy's named Tony Kemp. I'm sure he can find the woman that had the glass eye. It has to be documented. There has to be documentation. I mean, come on. She had a glass eye, and it turned into a real eye. Now, if you want to try to disprove this, go for it, Joe. And this ain't the only time I've heard. This ain't hard for me to believe this stuff. So let's move on, Joe. Let's move on to another one that has to do with eyes. Let's listen to this one, Joe.
Closes his eyes when he prays. So he didn't see it happen. Right. He actually thought someone switched little girls on him, but we have an eyewitness, and this eyewitness actually kept his eyes open. He's Pastor Eddie Rogers, who's been a guest on It's Supernatural. Let's take a look at what he saw.
There's some things that you have to stop and think about that happened in your past, but this is something that is so firmly etched in my memory that I'll never forget it. I remember the sounds, the smells. I remember the heat. 4,000 people gathered in a little square of a Nicaraguan city. There's ash that's raining down from a volcano about 10 miles away, and it's hot. These people have been there 4 or 5 hours, and Mel asked the pastors to go out into the audience and bring up the most difficult cases. And I'm on the platform with them, and they bring up this little girl, 6 years old. She's been born blind. It's just, her eyes are just totally white, and her mother is holding her. Mel brings her up, and he asks everybody to bow their head and close their eyes. And I'm thinking, if anything happens here, I'm going to be the one that's going to see it. I'm not bowing my head, reverently speaking. And he stuck his hand out toward the girl and began to pray. And what I observed was that in the whites of her eyes, it was like two whirlpools beginning to spin and turn. And I don't know how long it lasted, maybe 60 seconds, maybe 90 seconds. But at the end of that, these two beautiful brown eyes just popped. And she began to look around and see the lights. But the thing that tore me up the most was the fact that when this little girl turned and saw her mother for the very first time in her entire life, and the mother is just weeping, and I'm over there weeping as well, and it was the most incredible, moving miracle that I have ever seen in my entire life.
So anyway, Joe, I guess I'm going to title this message, "It's time for Joe Rogan to start seeing 2020. Like I said, this is 2020, Joe. It's time for you to wake up. If you're going to have a huge audience, which you do, you need to put the truth out there, because you're sowing a lot of seed. When you talk about Christianity, I understand that you have your belief in evolution and all that stuff, and I don't totally disbelieve that kind of stuff myself. I don't think it's all that complex. I think I had a supernatural experience about 40 years ago where God slowed down time, and I'm a very pragmatic, realistic guy. When I first experienced God when I was like 14 years old, Satan came, and I didn't know he could speak in my spirit back then. I didn't even know it was a demonic presence speaking to me. I didn't know back then how those type of things worked. But a nagging thing wouldn't let me sleep, because God showed up when I was about 14 when I got tricked into getting saved. And I never went to that church ever again, not once, after they tricked me. But God showed up, because I was at least honest. And the Spirit of God was there in my life. And I thought, man, this is great. This is like Christmas. When this presence is around, it's like it's the best day ever. Everything's blessed. And I was like, well, I don't want to lose whatever this is. I don't want to lose it. And I knew it was God, and I was afraid it would go away, because there was a blessing wherever it went. And I didn't know anything about anything back then. All I knew is I didn't want to lose it. And to be honest with you, I haven't even come close to getting that back from where I lost it when I was younger, as far as that type of presence. I know the way how to get it back now. But it has to be a way that I have to be willing to walk. I walked the wrong way for a long time. And when you walk the wrong way, your heart transforms into a different image. I'm not going to get into the depths of Christianity, how it works, but it's a transformation. I could probably I'm thinking about writing a book about stuff like that. Because a lot of people don't understand this stuff. But society, in a sense, is going through a transformation. Like in the Roaring '20s, the radio created the voice by speaking. The voice of the radio, there was hardly any radios in 1920, and then by the time 1929 came, when the Great Depression hit, the radio had totally infiltrated and saturated all of America, and just from that voice, it changed all the culture. Everybody's focus was on that one thing. See, I'm writing a book about focus. Well, I'm thinking about writing a book about focus, I don't want to get into the secrets on how that works. But basically, whatever captures your focus can brainwash you. See, I've studied the mind for about 10 years, and I'm writing books about that. So I'm not stupid when it comes to the mind. I'm not stupid when it comes to spiritual things. I'm not stupid when it comes to medical things. I worked in the medical field for 20 years, even though I didn't really care for it. I still had studied it. It's not something I wanted to do, but I studied it, and I wasn't stupid doing it. But I was a respiratory therapist for 20 years and dealt with quite a few life and death situations. So I probably saw about 500 people die, and it's not a very pleasant job dealing with sick people all the time. But anyway, I've done that. But what really interests me is the mind, because the mind is where it's at, you know. Anyway, I don't want to get too deep in all that. But I'm not stupid when it comes to the mind, and but basically, Joe, I think it's time for you to see 2020. You know, you always talk about your friends always going to a place, because you feel like something bad's going to happen eventually in California, whether it be earthquake or whatever. You feel like, you know, that you've overstayed your time, and that you know, you kind of would take your friends and move out someplace safe. But you don't have to move. God says in Genesis, "Where art thou?" All you got to do is shift yourself, and then you'll have this God that'll look out for you wherever you are. You don't have to move. And that this God, I mean, if you get in the right spiritual place, there isn't anything that God won't do if you ask him. I mean, he can even stop earthquakes from happening. I know that probably sounds stretchy to you. There's nothing that he can't do. You know, in the Bible, a man named Joshua spoke and the sun stopped in the sky. You know, you're talking about an entity that took a little seed, you know, that was smaller than an atom, and he expanded it and created the entire universe. And then he took another little seed and put it in a virgin woman. But you don't know the secrets of that. You got to understand, Sarah, who came from Abraham, who began the Jewish nation, when Abraham believed God and did the reverse of what Eve did, see, you don't understand all this stuff. A seed is the most powerful thing in the world. Word is either life or death. And a seed is what Eve took into her in Genesis. And a seed can, if I have one seed and all of the seeds in the earth get irradiated, and I still have one seed, because we can't even make a seed. We got CRISPR where we can kind of like change the DNA of a seed, but we can't make one yet. We can't make a seed. So if all the seeds of the earth got irradiated for whatever reason, let's say a solar flare, destroyed all the seeds, except for some place where we had some protected from radiation someplace, that means we could still take those seeds and regenerate the earth. So in Genesis, what scientists would understand, it's a shame there's not more Christians that are scientists, but a scientist would know that a seed is a big deal. That's why in Genesis, when Satan came, he created the first lie and spread it to his angels, and the angels went from angels to demons, because Jesus even gives the mystery of that. Jesus is so wise, and this stuff just goes whoop, right over your head, right over everyone else's head, right over Christianity's head. Jesus said, if the light that be in you is darkness, how great is this darkness? I mean, right now you marvel at the things that are happening in society, all the craziness from Donald Trump to the far left and the craziness in their acting. It's really not that crazy when you think about it, because Jesus said, if the light that be in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? It's not complex. It's very simple. You know, a lie is a seed. It's a powerful thing. If someone does not believe the truth, it's, for example, like you have Neil deGrasse Tyson on your show. Neil deGrasse Tyson thinks that he is way more intelligent than you are. That you're little Joe Rogan and he's Mr. Big Neil deGrasse Tyson. But that's not the truth. The truth is you're a smart guy. The truth is you're well-rounded in intelligence. You're well-versed in... Now, you don't know a lot about just one thing, but you do know a lot about a lot of different things. And Neil deGrasse Tyson knows a lot about one thing. But even a doctor, there's so many functions in the human body that are going on in the 40 trillion cells, and all the things that affect those 40 trillion cells as far as diseases. And you do one little thing, let's say you don't get enough magnesium, and it throws this off or this off, and then causes this and this, and there's just so many infinite interactions that can happen in a human body that you have to take everything into an account to make the right solution, for which can vary from individual to individual as far as that goes. There are fundamental solid principles that if someone does for the human body, that it's going to be good for them. For example, getting enough water, that's a good one. Just getting the right balance of water, That's a good fundamental principle, But, when someone believes something's not true, it affects their behavior. You see, I've seen a few episodes with Neil deGrasse Tyson just kind of come at you and won't even let you talk because he's afraid. He's afraid of people seeing the truth about you and the truth about him. He believes something, right? And these are the things in which people, whether it be low self-esteem or pride about yourself, it's never very pleasant when someone's either or, when they're not in that healthy balance of a thing called truth, right? People like Barack Obama, which, Trump's egotistical. Barack Obama was right in the healthy middle of truth for the most part, and we admired him that he conducted himself in that way. And I would even say that you would make a good president, Joe. I was thinking about that the other day. I was thinking, I think someone would make a good president would be someone like Joe Rogan. I was actually thinking that. So, Joe, I guess what I'm saying is time for you to start seeing 2020, since you investigate Christianity. Investigate the truth about Christianity. Because there's extremes on every end. That you've got some things that are so screwed up and it's just pure religion and it's just people going through the motions. But then you have the purity of Christianity on the other end of the spectrum, which is they're operating in truth and they're having supernatural miracles like these. I don't know any of these people. I've had many of the supernatural experiences that you see on the Sid Roth Show. So I just want to challenge you to investigate this. I don't think that's too much to ask. Since you have such a huge audience and you're affecting the minds and you're brainwashing people with what you believe, I think you have a responsibility as someone that has a large audience too, try to get to the truth on things. And that's all I'm asking. I don't think that's too much to ask.